This week on Africa Weekly, we focus on Madagascar, where 4 women who travelled to India to learn how to become solar technicians have returned home. They're now putting their training into practice. We travel to South Sudan, where 15% of the population live with a disability and feel the government could do more to help them. And after an old debate was reopened by France's president, we consider whether Western museums should be returning African artefacts to their original homes. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. Health officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Monday launched a targeted vaccination campaign against Ebola alongside the World Health Organization. The vaccine is being given to first responders and will soon be available to anyone who's been in contact with suspected cases.
There's a stock of at least 300,000 doses globally, and in the country we have around 8,500 doses that are available. So we can only vaccinate those who've been in contact with Ebola.
The latest Ebola outbreak in DRC has claimed at least 27 lives in the past 2 weeks. The WHO hopes to vaccinate 10,000 people in the next month. 12 people were killed in clashes on Wednesday in Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic. MINUSCA, the UN peacekeeping mission in the country, said it launched an investigation after a grenade went off in a Muslim-majority district. The area has seen a recent increase in violence. In April, an operation to dismantle UN militia bases led to fighting that left several dozens dead. A tropical cyclone that swept across the Horn of Africa has claimed at least 18 lives. Cyclone Segar formed off Yemen's coast and made landfall last weekend in Djibouti and Somalia. The storm destroyed roads and communication infrastructure, while thousands of people have been displaced. After a landmark referendum, Burundians have overwhelmingly backed constitutional reforms that could allow President Pierre Nkurunziza to stay in power until 2034.
The yes vote at the national level represents 73.26%.
On Thursday, Burundi's opposition filed a petition to the country's constitutional court in a bid to invalidate the result of last week's referendum, while the country's UN envoy called for a return to talks between the government and the opposition. And in Senegal, thousands of students protested across several cities to demand justice for a boy who was killed in clashes last week. The demonstrators also called for better living conditions.
We're asking for our scholarships. We have the right to claim our scholarships because we are students. We get 36,000 francs in scholarships. It's cheap. So why, every time we ask for our scholarships, we get white bullets, real bullets?
Recent youth protests have centred around issues about grants. Senegalese university students are entitled to scholarships of up to €55 a month. Not only is that deemed to be insufficient, the funds are also regularly paid late.
Up until the end of 2017, this isolated fishing village in western Madagascar had no access to electricity. Yolanda and her grandchildren used oil lamps as their light source.
First, there wasn't enough light. We couldn't work properly. And then the smoke made us sick. The children did not stop coughing, and they had blackened nostrils.
Today, nearly 200 homes are equipped with solar panels, and it is Yolanda and 3 other women from the village who install and repair the equipment, a skill acquired in India where they were trained as solar technicians.
When we left, I was a little scared because we didn't know this country. What impressed me most were the lights. It was really dazzling to see all those lights in India. We had lights on all the time, non-stop. The fan ran all day long, as did the electricity. There was no power failure.
The program has changed the lives of the villagers, who can now continue to study, work, or cook in the evenings. Solar energy can also help increase security.
There have already been 2 deaths here. They were shot dead. That's why we wanted to install outside lighting to see the bandits from afar and be able to escape in time or prepare.
By 2030, the project plans to supply 630,000 households with solar energy, a big step forward for a country where 94% of the population is still without electricity.
Omod James is blind and partially paralysed. He's just 27 years old. In 2013, back then a healthy young man, he was forced to flee the fighting in his hometown in South Sudan. It was here in this camp in the capital Juba that he fell sick. Omod is just one of the estimated 250,000 disabled people living in South Sudan. 200 of them live in this camp. And according to the International Red Cross Committee, about 50,000 people in the impoverished country have had amputations.
15% of the population is people with disabilities. But when it comes to a country like South Sudan, the percentage will be a bit high because every day people will be injured and the number is now increasing. If the problem continues like this, the most vulnerable people will be people with disabilities.
In 2015, the government passed a law to support people with disabilities. Yet today, only 3% of the state budget is designated for health. For those dealing with disabilities in South Sudan, it's just not enough.
Half man, half animal. These 19th century sculptures are some of the Quai Branly's treasured pieces. But as far as Benin is concerned, they were looted by France after its invasion in 1892, and they don't belong here. So should they be returned to their original home? President Macron seems to think so. In a historic move in Burkina Faso last year, he pledged to repatriate African art held in French museums within 5 years, much to the dismay of curators.
The debate immediately opened a legal issue since these pieces came into our public collections legally, given the relations at the time. And you know that once pieces are legally part of our public collections, they're inalienable. They cannot be returned to a so-called owner, who doesn't exist for these museums since these countries didn't exist at the time.
Macron's announcement was welcome news for Abidjan's Museum of Civilizations, which estimates large amounts of Ivorian artifacts are currently held overseas. But for the director, the process mustn't be rushed.
We have to see how all the conditions can be met to receive these objects, which are in a certain condition and will be arriving in a different space. So should these items be returned right away?
That is the question raised by some experts who believe most African countries are not equipped to take care of these artifacts. So rather than refuse to return them outright, some, like the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, are offering long-term loans. This collection of Ethiopian treasures, which includes sacred manuscripts and gold, was looted by the British Empire 150 years ago.
There are a lot of complexities surrounding their inclusion in the museum collection and their kind of legal status. So talking about a loan is perhaps the easier way of ensuring access to these collections.
The Ethiopian government has requested all the artifacts be returned, a request the museum has so far refused. But it's keeping a close eye on developments in France, where a set of guidelines on how to start returning African art is expected as early as November.
For these Moroccan women, surfing is about more than just fighting the waves. While female surfers have become a common sight off the coast of the capital Rabat, they still face prejudice on a daily basis. The conservative beliefs held by many in the North African country mean many women find themselves having to ask permission to hit the surf.
I hope that all those who have been forbidden by their fathers or brothers to do what they want will follow this path. Surfing makes you feel dynamic and active. Any woman should be able to discover that for herself.
Surfing first became popular in Morocco in the 1960s and gained more and more followers over the years. In September 2016, the country held its first international women's surfing contest, proof that attitudes towards female surfers are evolving. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.